Hello everybody and welcome back to LRN. Today we are looking at the inter-team battles between the drivers. How are they faring against each other? What do the stats tell us? And what does having watched the races tell us? Is there a disparity between the performance that we've seen on camera versus what we're seeing in the stats? Are there certain drivers that maybe are performing better than the stats suggest? Or are we seeing certain drivers that maybe the stats show that they really maybe need to do a lot to still earn their place on the F1 grid? So we're going to get straight into it. But before we do, please, if you are new around here, make sure to subscribe to the channel on the bottom right. And at the end, like the video if you do enjoy it. And I hope you get involved in the comments as well. And let me know your thoughts as we progress through the video. But we're going to get straight into it now by looking at the battle between Lewis Hamilton and George Russell in the... So in what was definitely deemed one of the most interesting battles going into the year was going to be Lewis Hamilton versus George Russell in the equal machinery at AMG Mercedes. So this is definitely one of the ones that we kind of thought might be pretty even, to be fair. I think obviously, you know, Hamilton is Hamilton, 7-time world champion, 8-time constructor. I think most people, even though they may have been on the side of Russell, would have considered that Hamilton would have the better of it. But of course, George Russell has been Mr. Consistency this season. And as you can see from the stats, so Russell is leading Hamilton 7-6 on race performance, 7-6 on qualifying performance. Mr. Saturday still reigns supreme, though of course not to the levels he did against Latifi in the past. Points, he's outscoring him now by 12 points, though that has reduced hugely over the last few races. We'll get into that in a second. Podiums, though, Hamilton is leading the way. Of course, his last 5 finishes contributing hugely to that for Hamilton. Massive performances over the last few races. Best race finish, Hamilton's favour. He's had a 2nd place, while Russell best place of 3rd. And of course, highest grid position, 1st place for Russell after his pole position in Hungary. Of course, Lewis Hamilton didn't get the opportunity to fight for that pole position given his DRS issues as he was about to go for his flying lap in Hungary. But all the props to Russell for getting that done. I have to admit, I don't think Hamilton would have beaten him to pole had he got that lap in. I think it was in the stars that Russell was going to do it. As we know, wasn't the quickest anywhere in any particular sector, but over the course of the lap, he set an awesome lap in Hungary to deserve that 1st place start. I do think Hamilton could have maybe started higher. Of course, he ended up starting 7th, but his highest grid position so far this season is 4th, and I certainly think he would have at least matched that, and potentially then they could have fought for the win. But either way, a really interesting read between Hamilton and Russell, and what has been a tale of two halves. So the beginning of the season, of course, we know that the struggles that Hamilton had, and Russell going on to set 5 top 5 finishes. So he's had a top 5 finish in every weekend except for Great Britain this season. Obviously, at Great Britain, we saw what he did at Silverstone, getting out the car, going to check on Zhou, claiming on Zhou Guanyu, and then sort of claiming that he'd only gotten out the car because of that. The car was still running, but they of course didn't allow him to run for the rest of the race, so he couldn't compete in Silverstone following that event. So he did officially DNF from Silverstone, but that was the only DNF on record for Mercedes this season. And that is how they've managed to perform so well in the constructors and in individually in the races as well, because they've always been there every single race to pick up the pieces when the other teams ahead of them fail. And that has allowed them to continue to pick up huge points this season behind the more dominant Ferrari and Red Bull. So fantastic performance from that point of view. The engine reliability from the Mercedes has been absolutely phenomenal. To only have 1 DNF, and obviously we'll get to compare that to other teams in a minute, but to only have 1 DNF is absolutely brilliant. So fair play to them. But in terms of what this means for the rest of the season, of course, we know that Hamilton at this stage has outraced Russell in the previous 5 weekends. And obviously, Russell was outperforming Hamilton prior to that. So Hamilton getting the better of it at the moment. Qualifying seems to be pretty even. But I think Hamilton's racecraft has come to the fore. He's getting used to the car. They're really nailing down these upgrades, and it's coming to Hamilton. That's how it feels at the moment, that the car's coming to Hamilton, not away from Russell. Russell's continued to be Mr. Consistency, but I think Hamilton's gone from being a bit behind Russell to just a bit ahead of him. And I think anyone who was chomping at the bit to say Russell is actually going to be the quicker driver, it's all about the car for Hamilton, I think Hamilton's gone, at least in the last few races, a long way to show, no, he's still the driver he always was. and he will be, in my opinion, by the end of the season, unless things go really wrong for him, back ahead and finishing ahead on points of Russell. So the interesting thing for me is not how things go for the rest of the season. I think everyone can agree they're not in the hunt this year for any championship gold unless an absolute catastrophe happened for Red Bull, because I think they're the only ones really in contention at this point. But what will be really interesting is what happens to that relationship between Russell and Hamilton in following seasons when Mercedes are fighting for the championship. Will it retain their sort of mutual respect relationship you see at the moment? No real issues between the two. Seem to be getting on well, working together to push Mercedes back to the front. Perfect partnership between the two. Both really, really quick, but with that massive experience of Lewis Hamilton, with the raw speed of George Russell. And of course, his awesome Saturday performances, which is absolutely ace for Mercedes. So, going to be interesting over the next few seasons. But I think my prediction for the rest of this season is that Hamilton will overcome that 12-point deficit, continue the form that he has shown in the last few races, and will finish the season just ahead of Russell. But that does not take anything away from Russell. He's been absolutely fantastic for Mercedes this season, and I'm sure he will continue in that vein in seasons to come. But I predict Hamilton will see out the season as ahead of George Russell. So next up then, we are talking Red Bull Racing and what has been a fantastic season for the Red Bull team. But going into it after the first few races, we kind of understood that it was Max's title to lose, and that we all hoped, I'm sure you'd agree, and unless you are a huge Max Verstappen fan, it would have been really good to see this season Sergio Perez, Checo fighting Max for that world championship. That would have been ideal. And I think around the Baku time, when Perez seemed to be turning a corner in the car, we really thought he was going to be able to do it. So as the stats will show then, we've got a 9 race to 3 advantage for Max, a 10 to 3 advantage in qualifying for Max, a 258 point to 173 advantage for Max, 10 podiums for Max, only 6 for Perez. Best race finish though of first, and highest grid position of first. As I say, those first positions for Perez coming at a period of time where he was giving us that hope, giving us that belief that he could really take the fight to Max. As Max sort of stepped off a bit, he started to struggle with the car, and we started to feel that that Perez could fulfill the potential that we've seen in him over a number of years. You go back to sort of the time he signed for McLaren when he was that young prospect, and it came too early for him, but this felt like the right time to him to get that big team move. And I thought he was going into it. I really felt that maybe he would go on and be able to put some pressure on Max, but it wasn't to be. But that's not to take anything away from Sergio. Obviously, that team is so angled towards Max Verstappen and his success. And luckily for them this season, it's not to their detriment. I think that in previous seasons, they could have arguably done better as a team, but it might have impacted Max had the car not been designed so much just to incorporate his wants and needs. Potentially, they could have gotten a few points more as a team, in my opinion. But nothing to take away from Max. He's been fantastic all season. I think he's been a lot maturer this season. A lot of the decisions he's made on track, he hasn't been as rash, been a lot calmer. I think maybe having that Drivers' Championship now, he doesn't feel he has to go fight so hard all the time to retain that position. He's learning patience and learning maturity, and I do think he's growing in the car. Obviously, there's still elements to his driving, to his game, where we've heard him on the radio losing it when his DRS wasn't open, as an example. And he still obviously has some of that petulance in the system, but that's just who he is. He's a determined person, wants to win. Outside the car, though, he's getting much better in terms of the media and how he presents himself in the sport. We do have those moments where it's Max of old, but I think on the whole, it's a much better experience for Max Verstappen. I think he is definitely developing as a driver, and to already be the Drivers' World Champion and developing more, I think only bodes well for both him and the team. But I think the race is done between Verstappen and Perez. I don't expect Perez to mount a challenge now. He's too far behind on points. Even if Perez started winning races and Max was coming home in second, I just don't think it would be enough over the 9 races that we have left, unless they get massive reliability issues. As you can see, compared to the Mercedes, of course, they have had 5 DNFs to only the 1 for Mercedes. So the powertrain's definitely not as reliable for Red Bull. However, they did have a lot of issues at the beginning of the season that they do seem to have fixed, and I do expect that they're kind of going to continue for the rest of the season without too many issues. Obviously, we could see some penalties because they have used up a lot of parts, and that could be interesting in those races. But we've already seen, Hungary being the most recent example, Max's pace starting in the middle of the grid and won at a canter at the end. He spun, he had issues, and he still won with a 10-second margin. So of course Hungary's a very specific type of track. As you say, it's a street circuit without the walls, right? It's very high downforce. It'll be different maybe on lower downforce tracks, and we'll see as we progress through the last 9 races of the season. But certainly I think they've got the pace. I think they've now got the reliability under wraps. And I think they've got the championship done. I know it's boring for the remainder of the season, but I think the championship's done. I think the drivers is Max's. I think the constructors is Red Bull's. And I don't see Perez putting any pressure on Max to change that. But I do hope at least that Perez can get back on his game, show what he's all about in the last 9 races, and maybe then go into next season with an opportunity then to push on and start to have a better fight with Max Verstappen from the beginning of the season. Though it could very end up being a Bottas-Hamilton situation, which I know Max would absolutely love, where he's very firmly the number 2. He doesn't quite have the talent to really take the fight to Max over the course of a season, but we'll see in time. I don't want to be too down on Perez too soon. I do think there's a huge talent there, and it'll be good to see if he can fight Max at least next season, because as I say, I don't think it's going to happen this season. But that's how the Red Bull drivers stack up at this stage of the year. So next up then, we have Ferrari, and what a year it could have been for the Scuderia. I think you look at the stats, so we'll go through the stats first. So 6 races each for Leclerc and Sainz, so really, really even. 10 qualifying to Leclerc to only the 3 for Sainz, so massive, massive advantage in the name of Charles Leclerc. 178 points for Leclerc to 156 for Sainz. 5 podiums for Leclerc to 6 for Carlos Sainz. And both of them have a highest position in both race and qualifying format of first. Obviously, Ferrari, one of the quickest cars this year, if not the fastest on their day. So that's not surprising at all. But of course, huge reliability issues for the Scuderia. 3 DNS for Charles Leclerc, all coming in races where he began on pole position. Huge what if scenario for Charles Leclerc. If those hadn't happened, just think where he could be in this title fight. Of course he is second, but think he's second and only 22 points ahead of Carlos Sainz, who has 4 DNFs. So do not make any mistake about it. If this car was reliable, both Leclerc and Sainz could easily be challenging the Red Bulls for the championship at this stage of the season. Ferrari's reliability has cost them hugely. Now, of course, Red Bull have had their own reliability concerns, and you could say if they hadn't had those, then it would be a similar gap to what it is. But the Ferrari has been, without a doubt, the most unreliable engine this season. And you think of the positions Leclerc was in when he had them. Obviously, we saw Sainz, famously his car blowing up in Austria. And to have 4 just against himself is just crazy. It's such a poor way to lose a championship. And you chuck in the reliability issues along with the strategic issues that the team have had and the decision-making processes that Ferrari have had. And it's such a question of what if. I think that Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz have proven to actually be very even. They're very different drivers. Leclerc, of course, has that 1-lap pace. On his day, he's as quick as anybody. No question about it. But you look at Carlos Sainz, and he's grown into the season. He obviously had the issues at the beginning of the year. It felt like he was never going to get to the end of the race after the first couple. It was so bad for him. I keep picturing him flying across the gravel in Australia, and it was so bad for him. I was so hopeful for Sainz and his season with Ferrari when they were such a quick car. But he obviously has managed to turn that around. He finally got his win in Formula 1 from pole position at Silverstone. So fantastic result for Sainz there, and he's definitely growing into the car. And I'm really interested to see how this is going to play out for the rest of the season. Of course, I expect Ferrari to favour Leclerc because he's second in the championship, and he is the closest to Max. If they've got any chance of catching him, in the drivers at least, they need to focus their attention on Charles Leclerc. But I think Sainz has proven to be potentially the more shrewd racer, the more reliable person in the race format now that he's got to grips with the car itself. You know, we saw in Hungary, there was that maybe Sainz was the slower of the two drivers, but I do expect that from time to time. I do think Leclerc on the day is the quicker driver, but I think it also comes down to consistency. I think Sainz can deliver consistency where Leclerc can deliver sporadic speed. Now, of course, I'm underplaying it a bit. Leclerc is, of course, a phenomenal driver and will deliver that speed more often than not. But we're talking about Ferrari. We're talking about needing to challenge Red Bull, two drivers at the top of their game all the time. And I do think that Sainz is started to show, for now at least, that he could potentially deliver a more consistent performance across the season that may give him a higher points haul if they were both to finish all the races and not have any reliability issues for the rest of the season. I think he may catch Leclerc. I do think Leclerc will probably see out the season and finish ahead. I think the strategy decisions will be favoured towards Leclerc as well, so look out for that along the season. But as the two drivers go, I have to say I think they're quite even. Other than Sainz's struggles to get to grips at the beginning of the year with the new car, obviously the new regulations as well, I do think they're particularly closely matched, and I expect that maybe into next year there's going to be huge question marks over who Ferrari pushes their number one, because I do think Sainz has all of the quality to challenge for that number one status at Ferrari, but we will certainly see. But if they are ever going to challenge Red Bull and realistically Mercedes looking into next year, I'd be shocked if Mercedes aren't challenging for those titles. They need to get their engine reliability sorted out, and we'll see with their customer cars just how bad the reliability for the Ferrari engine has been. But certainly one to look out for. Unfortunate season of what could have been for Ferrari, but we'll see how they get on and if they can get that together, and maybe we all mount a last minute challenge for at least one of the championships, though I do doubt it at this point. Here we are then with McLaren. So McLaren, of course, an interesting one. I think people aware that there's been a huge disparity in performance between their two drivers. So let's go through the stats then for McLaren. We've got a 9-4 race advantage for Lando Norris, 11-2 qualifying advantage for Lando Norris, 76-19 point advantage for Lando Norris. Note on that, only Perez and Verstappen have a larger margin between the two drivers than Norris and Ricciardo, and given of course the lower amounts of point at play where they are fighting in the F1 grid, that's a huge statement to see such a big disparity between the two drivers. Only the one podium for Norris versus none for Ricciardo, but of course that matches up where they are fighting on the grid this season, which of course puts a best race finish for third for Norris and sixth for Ricciardo. Highest grid position in qualifying of fourth for Lando Norris and sixth for Danny Rick. Of course, fourth in Hungary for Norris, and both only with the one DNF, again backing up Mercedes' lack of reliability issues with their power units this season. So fantastic for McLaren, at least, that they're not having a huge amount of reliability concerns, at least at this stage of the season. But I think it's fair to say that Lando Norris has been by far the better driver of the two. And of course, we know at this stage that other than an official announcement by McLaren or Piastri will be replacing Daniel Ricciardo at McLaren for next year. And it is hard to argue with the decision of replacing Ricciardo when you look at the disparity in the performance between the two drivers. Norris has been outperforming that car, and in my opinion, one of, if not the best driver of the season so far. It's so easy only to look and talk about the drivers that are winning races as being the driver of the season, or the driver even of the race, but you can't, in my eyes, look past Lando Norris as at least competing for the driver of the year so far. He is outperforming the McLaren on a weekly basis. And don't ever think of it as, Danny Rick's not, is struggling to do the bare minimum while Norris is doing the bare minimum. Norris is outperforming the car, while Ricciardo is probably delivering just under what the car can do. There's definitely that gap between the two. I think there's more that Ricciardo could be doing, but Norris is just that level of talent that he's just getting more performance out of that car than they probably have a right to. He has been absolutely phenomenal, and he's been like that, of course, for a few seasons now. A proper good raw talent to the sport, and I only wish him success. He's definitely got the talent to go on and be a future world champion. So honestly, it's not that bad for Danny Ric that he's not competing with Norris, not level with Norris. I think the concern with Danny Ric, what will really concern him as a teammate, because of course you're always looking across the garage to see that points difference, understand what the disparity between you and your teammate is. They are your first and main competition as you look to not just impress, not just for your own ego, but to impress your team and impress other teams. If you are angling for a move, they will look at your performance versus your teammates, and that will largely show where you'll end up in the future. You know, if you're someone that's always losing, you're probably going to go down the F1 grid, if not fall out of Formula One. If you're someone that's always beating your teammate, then they will see that, and you'll likely end up with a better seat in the future, unless you're already in the seat that you want long term. And I think that's the main concern for Danny Ric, the sheer difference in performance between the two of them. He will hate it. It will be absolutely eating him away that he has not just losing to Lando Norris. I don't think that would bother him so much, but losing by such a huge margin, it will be tearing him up. And as I say, I've been on for a while. I really hope that Danny Ric gets a good move and it all works out for him. He can find his form again, show the talent that we all saw in him for years, that we all felt there was a future world champion in Daniel Ricciardo. It certainly feels like that spark's been lost, but I'm hopeful for him that wherever he chooses to go, he'll find that passion, find that form again, and we can see the best of Danny Ric. But it certainly hasn't happened in the McLaren, and I wish him all the best wherever he ends up next season. But Norris has certainly proven that he is deservedly mentioned among the quickest and best drivers on the F1 grid, at least in my humble opinion. Love to know what you think below. Where do you think Norris ranks against the other F1 teams? F1 drivers? Do you think that he's up there with the best? Do you think he's in sort of a second tier? Where would you put Norris against the other drivers in the F1 grid? But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Of course, I don't expect Ricciardo to catch up Norris over the rest of the season. I do think he's shown some improved form in the last couple of races. Hungary showed some brilliant overtaking form. Really, really good to see that from Danny Ric, though of course the mistakes from the Alpines helped him out there, but he was there, he capitalized, you know, and he took the opportunity, and we haven't seen that a lot from Danny Ric over the course of the last couple of seasons. So good for him. Hope he can build on that. Hope he can finish off on a high and leave with his head held high by the end of the year. But certainly expect Norris to continue on his form and comfortably beat Ricciardo in the drivers' battle by the end. Moving on to Alpine, then we have the battle between Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon. So we'll run through the stats first. So a 5-8 actually advantage for Esteban Ocon. So Ocon leading the way in race performances. Alonso, however, leading the way in qualifying performances. Again, 8-5 points. Ocon leads the way on 58-41. Fernando Alonso. Best race finish of 5th for both, but a highest grid position of 2nd for Fernando Alonso. Of course, qualifying in 2nd place in Canada in the wet conditions with a fantastic qualifying performance, completely unexpected, but to see him up there in 2nd was absolutely phenomenal. So that was definitely a great day, at least, for Fernando Alonso. But of course, the points overhaul and the race performances show that Ocon has had the better of it this season, largely helped by Fernando Alonso, 2 DNFs, and had a P17 and P11 finish. So for those to happen in the first 5 races, clearly put him on the back foot, but he has gone on massive form since then, clearly getting used to the car, the regs, and gone on to an 8 straight scoring streak from Spain, the Spanish Grand Prix through to Hungary. So massive upturn in form from Fernando Alonso. I think this is one of those times where the better driver isn't winning in terms of the points totals in the driver battle between the two drivers. Obviously, I think Esteban Ocon is a talented driver, and he has been consistent in the Alpine and doing a brilliant job. I don't think anyone could argue against the fact that Fernando Alonso is the better talent of the two. Of course, he's now secured his move away from Alpine over to Aston Martin. Clearly feels that Alpine are doing all the wrong things, sees better prospects at Aston Martin long term, so he will be making that move. So it'll be interesting to see how his performances once he makes that move to Aston Martin compare, whether he can even compete with the Alpines when he moves over to Aston Martin, given Aston Martin's current form. But between the two drivers, I just think it's really interesting. We've seen them recently fighting on track. Ocon with the crazy defensive maneuvers against Alonso. Alonso having to overtake him, nearly coming together. Clearly, not everything is well in that team. Alonso maybe feeling the team should have done more to protect him, moving Ocon out the way when Alonso felt he was faster. Maybe things like that have all contributed towards Alonso's decision to leave the team. But certainly an even matchup this season. But given how the last 8 races have gone, I will predict that Alonso will catch Ocon by the end of the season on points and finish as the #1 driver in the Alpine team. It might be close. It could go sort of slightly either way. It really will depend on first of all, the performance of the car. How many points are they getting at each race? Because if they're fighting over 10th, there's not enough points there to actually to claw back the 17-point deficit Alonso has to Ocon at this time. But if they're still, the Alpines are looking strong. The Alpines are looking like they can continue to fight the McLarens, maybe ahead of them at certain tracks. Actually, probably are ahead of them at certain tracks. So there should be decent points on the table. So I think that Alonso can do enough to overhaul Ocon by the end of the season, or at least get to near enough level. Because he definitely seems to be the form driver over the most recent run of races. But we'll see if I'm right over the last 9 races of the season. Another battle I'm looking forward to see play out. Next up then, we have Haas and the battle between Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher. Let's go through the stats then. So a 7-5 race performance advantage to Mick Schumacher. A 11-2 qualifying advantage for Kevin Magnussen. A huge advantage there for K-Mag. So brilliant performances from him in qualifying. 22-12 point advantage for K-Mag over Mick. Of course, a lot of that happening in the first sort of race of the season, Bahrain. Massive performance by K-Mag, and of course it took a long time for Mick to get his first points, but definitely coming more into his own more recently. Best race finish of 5th for K-Mag. Again, Bahrain, fantastic result for them, but Mick did return with a 6th place position for his best race finish, which is brilliant for Mick. So happy for him that he finally got his first points. Not only that, he got points 2 races in a row. So definitely coming together for Mick at Haas, and definitely building his performances as the season has progressed, which is kind of a theme through a lot of the drivers in the grid, that they are getting used to these cars, getting used to the regs. The cars are obviously being developed and upgraded, and it's definitely helping some drivers more than others. I think Mick Schumacher, of course, being one of those as he gets more used to the car. But of course, one of the major issues for Haas in terms of their battle on the Constructors' Championship is that they run a Ferrari power unit. Another 6 DNFs for a Ferrari-powered team. Huge issues there. Of course, not of Haas's doing. They are the customer. They purchased the engine from Ferrari. They are dependent on the reliability that comes with what they are buying, and it simply isn't there. So 6 DNFs then for the Haas team, which is just so disappointing for them. But in terms of the drivers, I think obviously K-Mag started the strongest in the season. He had a fantastic start. He showed what that Haas can do, and he showed why he was brought back to the fold. Clearly, they could have left K-Mag out of it. They could have brought someone else in, a youngster, but they lost Mazepin, and Magnussen was brought in as a replacement, and he has shown why he was in F1 for so long with some incredible performances in that Haas. So really well done to K-Mag. As I said, took some time for Mick Schumacher to get to grips with the car, but he's finally there, and they are fighting for points. And Mick Schumacher to finally get his first points of his F1 career was absolutely brilliant. And to hear Vettel cheering him on as well, we love that relationship. That was brilliant too. But honestly, it's so hard to dislike these guys. I think they're absolutely brilliant. Obviously, love Haas in the sport. Gunter Steiner's just comedy gold, and I just hope to a good season end for both of them. I think that Mick Schumacher probably won't catch K-Mag on points. I don't think there's enough performance in the Haas across the 9 races we've got left for there to be enough points on the table to catch. I mean, you consider we've had 13 races already. He's got less than 1 point a race. Of course, that average could go up, but I don't suspect it'll go up enough for not only him to catch to get another 10 points, but for him to also catch K-Mag, who will likely score some points as well. So I simply don't think there's enough time left on the board for Mick to catch K-Mag unless something magical happens. He could have a huge performance and K-Mag might not score any points. But based on current evidence, based on current performance and where we are at this point of the season, I think K-Mag will finish ahead of Mick, but I think they're going to be a lot closer in terms of their overall performances with each other than they were at the beginning of the season. And I think if they are the same team next year, if Mick does carry on at Haas, though it is highly suspected he may move on, if this partnership is retained for Haas for next year, I suspect that Mick could beat K-Mag over the course of next season, but it's a big if, given that we don't even know if Mick will actually still be at Haas next season, with only K-Mag currently confirmed and there being lots of rumours that he will be moved on. So we'll see. But as I say, my prediction on this one is that K-Mag will see out his position ahead of Mick on points for the rest of the season. Of course, heavily helped by the fact that he's such a good qualifier, as you can see by his performances there. But certainly, I do think that on race day at least, far more even. Of course, we've seen Mick finishing at the better of the race performances in terms of where they finished ahead of each other. But when it counted, K-Mag's finished in the points when needed, and he's got the bigger points haul, and I expect that to be retained by the end of the season. So next up then, we have the AlphaTauri team of Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda. So in terms of stats, we have 8-5 advantage in race performance for Pierre Gasly. The same again in qualifying, an 8-5 advantage for Pierre Gasly. 16 points to 11 advantage for Pierre. A best race finish of 5th for Pierre over the 7th for Tsunoda. And a highest grid position in qualifying of 6th for Gasly over the 8th for Tsunoda. Both, though, with 3 DNFs each. Of course, them running the Red Bull powertrain, they're having more reliability issues, it seems, than their compatriots in the main Red Bull team. Though, I believe Tsunoda's had a couple of issues himself, maybe having a couple of incidents that may have contributed to those DNFs from memory. But as we look at it, obviously, the high point for Tsunoda this season was his 7th place finish at Imola, but Gasly's 5th place came in Azerbaijan, in Baku. So fantastic result for Gasly there, and what made up the majority of his points in terms of percentage. So fantastic result for him. I think Gasly, Ricciardo's come out recently and said that Gasly's the most underrated driver in the sport. I think he's obviously struggled, well, like a lot of people, to adapt to the new regulations, but I don't think you can question after years of proof that Gasly is a top driver in this sport. I think he deserves to get out of the Red Bull outfit. He deserves better than a second team that will never compete for anything, because they're not trying to. They're not ever going to try and outperform Red Bull. Anyone who performs at a high enough level in the AlphaTauri team should be given an opportunity in Red Bull. Of course, Gasly did receive it, but I do think that it didn't necessarily, he wasn't really given the opportunity. The team was very, very heavily leaned towards Max Verstappen and a car designed purely for him. It did not suit Gasly. He went straight back to AlphaTauri, or to Toro Rosso maybe at the time, and massively outperformed the car and put in some fantastic performances. He has shown time and time again there's a driver there when you give him the car that he likes. I think he deserves an opportunity out of the Red Bull stable to drive at a better team. I think he's earned that at this stage. In comparison to that, I think you look at Yuki Tsunoda. I think he's done a fantastic job. I think he's very young, very raw, a good talent with a lot to learn. He has had good performances. He's definitely got some pace. Immature, sure. Lots to learn in the sport. He's in the right place at the moment, I think. He definitely needs to serve some more time at AlphaTauri learning his trade. And maybe one day he'll get that opportunity to jump up to the Red Bull team, and given the opportunity that Gasly and other drivers have had before him, like Albon, etc. But I think he's good for the sport. He's a good personality to have around. Love hearing his team radios when he's just yelling expletives for what seems like a lot of time, absolutely no reason. So he's a good laugh, and he brings a lot. And he grew up in the sport, and I think he's great. I don't think he's on the level of Pierre Gasly at this stage of his career, but I do think the talent's there if he can add the maturity and the development to his race to start to catch up to I think the racecraft that you see from a Pierre Gasly. But don't take it away from him. It's been another strong season for Tsunoda, given how inexperienced he is. And I am looking forward to seeing how Tsunoda develops over the next few years in F1. And I definitely hope that he remains on the F1 grid, because he's a good addition to the sport. But I'm hoping for Gasly's sake that he can find another drive. I personally think Alpine should 100% be looking at Pierre Gasly for their seat over Daniel Ricciardo. I think he's a more proven entity in recent years. And I think he deserves it. I think he deserves a chance outside of the Rebel stable. I think Alpine would be a perfect platform for him to go and do that. Obviously, work with Ocon to try and develop that team. Someone needs to take a chance on Pierre Gasly, and it needs to happen soon for his sake. He's earned it. He's at the right age. He could go somewhere, sign a good 3, 4, 5 year deal, and really help build a team, and hopefully have some success. But he's never going to have success at AlphaTauri, so at least at another team he'll have an opportunity at success, even if it doesn't come to fruition. So let's see how it goes for Gasly, but definitely for me one of the most underrated drivers on the grid. And that's not to say he isn't rated, but by the sheer fact that he drives for AlphaTauri still, for me, is just not right for a driver of his caliber. It's definitely a learning stable team, as opposed to a full-on F1 team that will ever fight for race wins, at least on a consistent basis. So yeah, that is the review of AlphaTauri. Moving on to Alfa Romeo then, and what looks like a really lopsided performance then for Valtteri Bottas versus Zhou Guanyu. So we've got a 10-2 advantage in the race for Bottas, 10-3 advantage for Bottas in qualifying, a 46.5 advantage for Bottas versus Zhou Guanyu. 5th best race finish for Bottas versus a 8th best finish for Zhou Guanyu. 5th for Bottas again with highest qualifying position versus 9th for Zhou Guanyu, and 3 DNFs for Bottas versus 5 for Zhou Guanyu. What a massive impact again the Ferrari powertrain is having on the season of their customer cars. I cannot, I would love to be able to hear the conversations behind closed doors of teams like Alfa Romeo and Haas, and the conversations they're having with Ferrari about the reliability issues of these engines. They are so poor. You know, the old adage of to finish first you must finish does not apply to Ferrari, because more often than not, it feels like they're not even getting to the end of the race, these engines. It's just so bad. And of course, it's not good reading for Zhou Guanyu to be so behind Bottas on all of those stats, especially given that Bottas has had his issues as well, having 3 DNFs. But I definitely think that those DNFs for Zhou Guanyu have massively compromised his season overall. And of course, the more time he has in the car, the more time he has to get used to it. He is still very fresh to the sport, and he needs time to develop, and the more mileage he gets in the car, the better. I do think he still has some stuff to prove, but Bottas, of course, has been around such a long time. He's so experienced. He's got so much ability in the car. There's a reason Mercedes brought him to the team. And of course, he was never able to overcome Hamilton's superior performances, but he'd shown in Williams in years gone by how good he was. That's why he got the drive in the first place. And I think he's back to showing again in the Alfa Romeo why Mercedes wanted him those years ago. He's a good, solid F1 driver, a really good benchmark for other F1 drivers to test themselves against. He's so consistent. He's so strong in the car. Yes, he's not at the top tier. He's second tier. He isn't going to compete with your Verstappens and your Hamiltons and your Alonsos, but he is the gateway. He is the guy below that will challenge, that will put down that challenge to say, if you want to be a top guy in F1, you need to be able to beat me. And right now, Zhou Guanyu is not doing that. But as I say, that's not a diss on Zhou Guanyu. I think Zhou Guanyu needs more time in the sport. I'm not making any conclusions on him as a driver at this stage of his career. I don't think that's fair. But I do think he's in a really good place to know when he has stepped up his game, because Bottas is the perfect person to be able to measure yourself directly against. Because if you're beating Bottas, you are in a strong position when it comes to other teams and their interest in you, because Bottas will deliver consistently good performances, if not great. So really good place for Zhou Guanyu to be and learn his trade. And fantastic for Bottas to continue to deliver massive performances. Obviously, you know, in the Alpha, so not going to be as high up the grid as he was for Mercedes, but given the car that he's driving, he's had some huge performances, continues to be a measuring stick in the sport, and I'm just really happy for him that he seems to be enjoying life, having fun, glad to be out of the spotlight that was on him constantly in at Mercedes. And I hope that that success continues, and I hope that what he's getting in terms of his happiness in the car is at least giving him some comfort that he's not in a car that can compete for race wins at this stage of his career. So, as I say, fantastic for him. And looking for the rest of the season, no, I don't think Zhou Guanyu is going to be catching Valtteri Bottas in terms of point haul or performances, but I do think he's got 9 more races to go out there, learn his trade, and come back with a fresh start next season, and maybe maybe he can take it a much closer fight to Bottas, and again measure himself. How is he progressing as a driver in the sport of F1? No better driver to compare yourself. On to the penultimate team then, and we have Aston Martin and the battle between Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel, who of course has recently announced that he will be retiring from the sport at the end of the season. So having a look at the stats, we've got a 6-5 advantage for Sebastian Vettel in races. We've got 8-3 advantage for Sebastian Vettel in qualifying, 16-4 advantage for Sebastian Vettel, a best race finish of 6th versus a best race finish of 10th for Lance Stroll, a highest qualifying position of 9th for Vettel versus 10th of Stroll. And of course, 2 DNFs for Vettel and only 1 for Stroll. So when you look at it on paper, it kind of matches what you see in real life. Vettel's a better driver than Lance Stroll. I think we all know that. I think that Lance Stroll, it continues to be lucky to have a seat in F1 at all. Of course, we know why he has it. His dad owns the team, and that makes it extremely easy for him to have that arrogant, smug look on his face every time he arrives at a track, without having any reason whatsoever to have the ego that he does. He, of course, has had good races in the past, and he has a couple of tracks that he excels at, but I don't think there are going to be many people or fans of F1 that believe Lance Stroll couldn't be replaced in the sport by a more talented driver. It simply isn't true. And we have a driver in Sebastian Vettel who many people think, you know, in terms of his ability as a driver, he has faded over the last few years. Of course, hit hugely by his time at Ferrari. And I just, you know, Stroll can't get anywhere near him. Not in terms of quality or performance. He's not as good a driver. You know, a best race finish of 10th. Yes, it's been a questionable season for Aston Martin. Yes, the car is questionable. Their design process is questionable. But Vettel's done more with the car. And he's scored 16 of the 20 points that Aston Martin scored as a team this year. And given that Stroll has only scored a best place finish of 10th so far this season, if you just assume that that's going to carry on for the rest of the year, he will, at maximum, if he's finished 10th at every race for the rest of the season, score 13 points and finish behind Vettel. So, rubbish season for Lance Stroll. And, well, no, that's not even true. Fine season for Lance Stroll, matching his ability as a driver. And I just pray that one day his dad turns around and says, I'm sorry, son, you're not going to be driving here anymore. Obviously, I've given you the opportunity. You've had a few years in the car. You haven't shown what you can do. I need to focus on the team being successful. I hope you forgive me, but I'm replacing you next year. Because that's what should happen. For the integrity of the sport, people like Lance Stroll should not be driving in it. He continues to hold up a position that someone else should have because he is not talented enough to be driving in Formula One. Now, of course, he's a fantastic driver, but we are talking about the top 20 drivers in the world. He is not one of them. So, yes, Vettel's leaving. They've, of course, brought Fernando Alonso in. And given that I think Fernando Alonso is on another level to Vettel, I think Alonso is definitely, at this stage of their careers, of course, we know how successful Vettel's been at the past, but at this stage of his career, Alonso is the better driver, the quicker driver, the more likely to just pull a crazy result out of the bag driver than Vettel, and especially Stroll. So to see the gap between Alonso and Stroll next season is going to be very, very interesting. And I'm so interested to see how long they can persevere with retaining Stroll in a team when he brings absolutely nothing to the team, or to the sport. So we'll see. But given what I've just said, I'm sure you know, I have no faith that Stroll will overcome Vettel's points haul and that Vettel will see out the season, his final season, as at least winning the inter-team battle at Aston Martin, so he can retire at least happy in the knowledge that even in his worst days, he was still better than Lance Stroll. Here we go then, the final team, Williams, and the battle between Alex Albon and Nicholas Latifi. So we'll go through the stats. 10 race to 3 for Latifi, so in favour of Albon. 11 qualifying sessions to 2 in favour of Albon. 3 points for Albon, none for Latifi. A best race finish of 9th for Albon and a 12th for Latifi. Grid position, though, qualifying, best of 12th for Albon and 10th for Latifi. Of course, we had Latifi qualifying in P10 in Silverstone. And even topped a session in Hungary in FP3. But I think that's where the positives end for Latifi. Albon has clearly been the team leader this season. He's clearly been the better driver. He's clearly been the one who's proven that he is the George Russell replacement and that he is absolutely deserving of a place in Formula 1. I think the rumour is that Latifi, this will be, at least for now, his final season in Formula 1. I expect him to be moved on. He has not shown enough to be retained in the sport, similar to Lance Stroll, but without his dad around to keep him in a seat. I like Latifi. I think he's a really nice guy, clearly well liked around the paddock, but it's a ruthless, ruthless sport unless you have your dad in owning the team, and he will be probably let go. I don't think he's delivering enough for the team. I don't think he's got enough experience to try and say that he's worth keeping around for what he could help, the experience he has to help develop the car, develop the team, bring them forward. I don't think he has that either. If you're keeping him there, it's because of what he brings on a race day, on a qualifying day, and as you can see here, it's not great. Funnily enough, though, in terms of DNFs, they have been highly impacted. They've got 6 DNFs. Obviously, Latifi's DNFs tend to come from his own mistakes, but still, we know they have had engine issues too, which, given they're running a Mercedes power unit, is quite surprising. They've definitely had more than the other Mercedes teams, so something to be said there. But certainly, Albon has proven without shadow of a doubt that he is the #1 driver at Williams, and I think by far the better talent between the two. Latifi, he's such a nice guy, but yeah, he needs to be moved on. And another person, Williams is such right now. Obviously, Williams has been really successful in the past, but right now Williams is proving to be a place where drivers can come in, prove themselves for a drive in a better car, and then will be moved on, like Russell, to Mercedes in the future. And I don't think that's a bad place for Williams to be for the time being, though of course I'd love to see them back fighting at the front. But what I can say is that Latifi's chance has come and gone. He needs to be moved on, and that will open up another seat for someone else to come in, hopefully young driver, prove themselves in the sport, someone who can go on and do bigger things, right? There's only so long we can sustain people in the sport that don't have those prospects. He may come with big money. I'm not sure with Latifi what he brings in terms of sponsorships and money to the team of Williams. That might be another reason why they might look to keep him around. But I have to look at this from a pure sporting perspective. And from that perspective, I don't think there's an argument to keep him around. But fair play to Albon. He's done a fantastic job in the car. I think he's outdriven the car a lot of the time, doing a very George Russell-esque job. And he's the one that's finally brought points back to Williams this season. So 3 points this season for Albon is absolutely fantastic. So really, really good performance from him. And I hope to see Albon build on that. Of course, he's recently signed a multi-year contract, so really happy for him that he's got that deal, that he'll be retained in the sport. I just think he needs someone better alongside him to help him and Williams on that journey back to success. So I'm definitely going to say that Albon is going to retain his position in terms of points as the more successful driver of the year. And I will probably go out on a limb and say that unless something crazy happens and there's a race with huge amounts of DNFs, that Latifi will be finishing the year on 0 points and without a drive in Formula 1. But they are my predictions. So if you've stuck around for the whole thing, thank you so much for watching. Please do make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new around here, and hit a like on the video if you did enjoy it. Let me know in the comments below what you think of any of the battles. Do you think I've got anything wrong? Do you think there's different drivers who maybe are going to outperform what I've said, or better than maybe I've made out? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. But I'm just going to thank you so much for watching today. I hope you have a great day.